February 6, 2024, 5 o'clock p.m. All trustees are present. We have in attendance on the phone Trustee Leclerc, Trustee Hatfield, and Trustee Cook. And my apologies, regrets from Trustee Cheen. I'm going to call for approval of the agenda.
Excuse me. Hello?
Yes.
Madam Chair? This is Trustee Hatfield. Since I can't be there tonight in person, and I wanted to make sure you had some assistance in running the meeting, so I wanted to nominate Trustee Buckler to be acting chair or vice chairperson for the meeting, because I know other trustees are chairing committee meetings, and I thought that Trustee Buckler could pitch in and help you out because she's experienced. So I'm making that nomination.
Sure. We will have some nominations a little bit later in the agenda, if that's okay with you.
No, you can do it now because she can take over as acting vice chair now.
Okay. We'll approve the agenda first. Can I have a mover? The agenda as amended to have a vice chair and acting vice chair. Could I have a mover? Trustee Armstrong, and a seconder, Trustee McKinley, all in support. That passes. Yes, Trustee Burgess. Microphone.
The acting vice chair amendment is at C1. We just approved, we're going to approve the agenda as the next thing we do is nominations for a vice chair?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have a vacancy for the position of vice chair of the board.
It's acting vice chair.
Acting vice chair. I will be acting as acting chair of the board for this evening. And so we have a vacancy for the position of acting vice chair of the board and acting vice chair of Ops and Finance due to physical absence. Is there a consensus to elect for both positions? Yes? Okay. So we're going to call for nominations.
I made mine, so.
Thank you, Trustee Hatfield. Do we have any more nominations? Do you stand, Trustee Buckler? Yes, thank you. Do we have any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? And Trustee Buckler, do you accept? Thank you. Then Trustee Buckler is our vice chair for this evening, our acting vice chair. The other vacancy is acting vice chair for Ops and Finance. Do we have a nomination for acting vice chair of Ops and Finance? Trustee McKinley?
I'll self-nominate.
Self-nominated. Any other nominations for vice chair of Ops and Finance? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Then Trustee McKinley is our vice chair of Ops and Finance, our acting vice chair of Ops and Finance for this evening. Moving on, we're going to convey to private session. Can I have a mover? Trustee Burgess, and a seconder, Trustee McKinley. And we now move into private session. Call for all in favor, all in support. Thank you very much. And now we move into private session, and we'll be back for public at 7 p.m.
like to welcome you to our February education meeting during Black History Month. I'm happy to be up here again. So I'd like to start with the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are on land and surrounded by water, originally inhabited by Indigenous peoples who have traveled this area since time immemorial. This territory is within the lands honored by the Wampum Treaties, agreements between the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenni, Lenape, and allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Specifically, we'd like to acknowledge the presence of the Three Fires Confederacy, Ojibwe, Odawa, Potawatomi, and Huron-Wendat peoples. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture while remaining committed to moving forward respectfully with all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. Okay, for attendance, we have Trustee Hatfield, Trustee Chen, Trustee Cook on the phone. I believe they're all on. And we have regrets from Trustee Leclerc for tonight's meeting. And the rest of the trustees are around the front. I have a mover for the approval of the agenda. Trustee Nelson, Trustee Sipkar, second. Are there any questions? Trustee Buckler?
Can we just change the chairperson and vice chairperson on the front of the agenda, please? Well, it should be on the, that's the agenda. I'm asking for that to be changed to approve the agenda.
Yeah, not a problem. That will be corrected. Okay, so with that slight change, can we have a vote? Support of the agenda, all in support? Yep. Any opposed? Seeing none, thank you. Declaration of conflict of interest? Seeing none. Approval of the minutes. Do I have someone to move the minutes for 2023-10-03? Trustee Sipkar, second. Trustee Buckler. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in support? Any opposed? Thank you. Business arising from the minutes. Is there any business arising from those minutes? I know it's been a while, but okay. Seeing none, we'll move to the first presentation. I believe it's being done by Superintendent Bell. Presentation on a well-being update. Oh, the theme, yes. Yes. Oh. While we're waiting for the technology to set up, I would like to just, oh, I guess it's off the screen. We had our lovely little new, what's that? Logo? Yeah, that's the word I wanted, logo, sorry. Up there just before that on interconnectedness. It's a mouthful, but very appropriate for many of our presentations this year. So you'll get a look at it again after. So are we all ready?
Check. Sorry, Madam Chair, we're just having some technical issues at the moment. We can see the slides, but you're just seeing the first slide. It's a PowerPoint.
Sorry about that, yes. While we are waiting for the tech to get figured out, I will take a moment to acknowledge some February and March dates. To note, first off, I already acknowledged Black History Month. As well, in March is the Developmental Disabilities Month. Also in February, we have Lunar New Year, which is February the 10th. National Flag Day of Canada, February 15th. And lest we forget, because we won't have an education meeting in March, but International Women's Day is March 8th. So if you want those dates afterwards, feel free to let me know and I'll give them to you again. So just wanted to highlight some of those. We all corrected now? Got it fixed?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Great.
Okay. Thank you for having me. And tonight, bringing forward a student well-being department update to you. So student well-being is important to all of us and is fundamental to student well-being is student mental health. We know and acknowledge that schools are an ideal setting for mental health promotion, addiction education, awareness education, resiliency, and connecting those in need to care pathways. Thus, student mental health and well-being continues to be a priority. We have a mental health and addictions 3-year strategy that sets out actions to foster mental health and well-being. Here is our vision for our student mental health strategy. Overall, our approach to student mental health focuses on promoting positive health and well-being and providing a tiered approach to supporting students. What is meant by a tiered approach? Well, if you look at this triangle, at the base of the triangle, there are a variety of supports and strategies that are listed, such as welcome, to understand, to partner. Today we'll be getting into a little bit of the understanding, and especially understanding mental health literacy and knowing your students. It's helpful to remember that our main role in schools relates to wellness and prevention. It follows then that the main role of school staff is to help to support mental health through creating welcoming and inclusive classroom environments, building student mental health knowledge and social emotional skills, and in keeping an eye out for students who might be struggling with their mental health at school. Educators are not mental health professionals, but we can create caring classrooms where students are comfortable taking risks, practicing social emotional skills, and asking for help when they need it. Other school staff can also support by taking time to greet students warmly, to get to know them, and keep a watchful eye for when something seems to be unusual for them or when they need a helping hand. I thought it was important to include from School Mental Health Ontario here some of the why. And we can see that from a survey that was conducted in 2021, we're hearing that students want to learn about mental health in their classrooms, that we know that by engaging in this work, it helps students develop the skills that will support mental health. It actually transfers over and supports learning in other areas. This other point about encouraging conversations and help students in need access support is really talking about the stigma. And of course, as caring adults in the lives of students, we want them to be well. So today, I will be focusing on and share with you the work and the actions that we are engaged in for the development of student mental health literacy, and in particular, for those students that are in grades 7 and 8. But let me begin with PPM 166, Student Mental Health. So as a directive under this PPM, in May of 2023, the Government of Ontario announced the mandatory delivery of teacher-led modules for grades 7 and 8 students. This learning was to be in alignment with the health physical education curriculum already in place. So going deeper into the mental health literacy modules, I did think it was important to share with you the Public Health Agency of Canada has defined positive mental health as the capacity of each and all of us to feel, think, act in ways that enhance our ability to enjoy life and deal with the challenges we face. It is a positive sense of emotional and spiritual well-being that respects the importance of culture, equity, social justice, interconnections, and personal dignity. Also wanted to provide this committee with some information about what is mental health literacy. So mental health literacy is about understanding and building the skills and confidence to support and maintain our own mental health. It's also about developing fundamental mental health knowledge and help-seeking skills and decreasing stigma. I'll give some examples about that soon. Our educators are already building the mental health literacy of students through teaching the curriculum. Educators also support student well-being every day through what is called or termed as mental health promotion. The goal of mental health promotion is identity-affirming wellness and positive mental health. Actions like greeting students warmly, getting to know students, varied interests in their backgrounds, noticing students that you may be concerned about, as well as communicating and partnering with parents and caregivers are all examples of mental health promotion in action, and they absolutely all make a difference for our students. Put a little bit differently, if we think about it, in mental health literacy and developing it for our students or for ourselves, it's about acquiring knowledge about mental health. It's about exploring beliefs and attitudes related to mental health. Sometimes the negative of that is we'll call it a stigma, a negative stigma. And in building confidence in skills and actions that encourage positive mental health at school. So what are the mental health literacy modules? Well, let's look a little closer. This learning includes a series of 3 modules per grade, grades 7 and 8, to be delivered by educators to support the existing mental health literacy expectations within Strand D of the Health and Physical Education curriculum. The learning has been scaffolded and is designed to build as the teachers progress through the modules. The modules follow a familiar 3-part lesson format, including a minds-on, action tasks, and a consolidation. They include user-friendly tools like videos and slide decks, along with discussion guides and teacher prompts to assist in this delivery. For those in the audience that are not perhaps versed in some of the terminology up there, if you think about a minds-on, it's an activity for student reflection and activating their previous learning or prior knowledge. When we refer to action tasks, it's the engagement with the core content of the module. And the consolidation is really about an opportunity for students to reflect on their learning. Following all these, included in the modules are a selection of activities that educators can choose from that wrap up the learning in a positive way and help students transition to the next part of their day or where they're going to next. Actually, before I go to the next one, I'll just give you a little bit more information. Overall, both sets of modules, both for grades 7 and 8, equip students with culturally responsive, evidence-based knowledge, skills, and strategies to support their mental health and well-being. Educators are well positioned to guide this learning. The focus of the learning is on well-being rather than individual mental illnesses or their management. The modules are fairly easy to use, and additional supports are available in both English and French. And it is not anticipated that teaching about mental health will be distressing for students. In fact, the research tells us that when mental health literacy is done in a sensitive and appropriate manner, discussing mental health can have positive impact on students' well-being. Here on the screen is in greater detail are the grade 7 module themes on the left-hand side with the curriculum expectations on the right. So as an example, the mental health, mental illness, and the relationship between them really introduces the concepts of mental health and mental illness and strategies to promote positive mental health. The second one, understanding signs of a mental health problem and how to seek support. Well, it supports students to monitor their own mental health and know when, where, and how to seek support. And mental health, substance use, and the relationship between them, it focuses on substance use, its connection to mental health, potential effects, risks, and harms, and how to reach out for support. Here on the screen, I'm just sharing with you the 3 module themes for grade 8, and you can see that clearly linked to the curriculum expectations. The implementation. I'm very proud to say that this work has been a collaborative effort between student well-being and the program department, bringing together a consultant, a special assignment teacher, and the board mental health lead to help create, deliver, and support the professional learning of all of our grades 7 and 8 educators. This has been taking place during January and February, so it's ongoing right now. We've had 2 sessions so far, and it's really at this point being able to bring these educators together, making them familiar with the material, allowing them to engage in collaborative conversation with one another, and be supportive in delivering these learning opportunities to our students. An important aspect of what's included in this work is actually creating a feedback loop for ourselves as safe schools and as a program department. And an important part of that feedback is that not only are we still delivering 3 more sets of these sessions, but the government has also announced that learning for mental health literacy for grade 10 students will be added as part of the career studies course for the fall of 2024. So we really want to get better at this and preparing our educators, our teachers to engage in this work. Alongside that, we have a course on offer for our school leaders. So this is a course designed specifically for school leaders in collaboration. This course was designed in collaboration between the Ministry of Education with School Mental Health Ontario. And this course illuminates the connection between learning and mental health and helps our school leaders to advance their leadership practice in this particular area. And although today focused on mental health literacy modules as per the PPM 166, I thought it was important to share a couple of other initiatives and projects that Student Wellbeing Department is working on. So we continue with the special assignment teacher of student wellbeing. Jody Nolan, his name has come up before, working with our mindfulness project, and we're continuing that work. But and I must say that both Jody Nolan and Sarah Jackman, the consultant I mentioned earlier, not by name, are instrumental in bringing this work to our grade 7 and 8 educators alongside mental health lead Cherise Pauly. So Ms. Nolan is instrumental in supporting a variety of teachers and accessing the School Mental Health Ontario modules. There are also other modules available all the way K to 12, but we're focusing right now on the grades 7 to 8. We continue with the Welcome and Inclusive Schools campaign. So this is just a mid-year update for you. Certainly I'm hoping this number could be even greater by the end of the year. But as part of our bullying prevention intervention strategy, both elementary and secondary schools have the opportunity to receive up to $400 in project grants, funding to promote a culture of kindness campaigns in their communities. This work has been ongoing for several years now in our board, and we're pleased at this point in time we've actually had 35 schools reach out and engage, and we are certainly still taking applications from school. We're going to keep that open for as long as we can. And I want to leave you with just an informational item that it is Mental Health Awareness Week this year, the 13th and 19th of May. So more information to follow, and we'll do our appropriate channels with our media and comms as that date approaches. And at this point, I will open it for any questions.
Do we have any questions of Superintendent Bell? Okay, I think Trustee Burgess does then, not seeing any other hands.
Thanks for that presentation. Took a good few notes. For our professional developments, when all of our educators got together and they had some rich discussions, etc., what are they saying amongst themselves? How are the kids doing? What do they think?
That's through the chair to Trustee Burgess. I think that's a great question. Trustee Burgess, I must confess, I've only been at the beginning part of both sessions to connect, or the beginning and the end of one session. So I haven't yet examined all the feedback from our staff. What I can tell you is that there is really good engagement with the learning, because they're going to be taking it away to their students. So they haven't yet work through this material with our students. We're preparing them to deliver that. They will be delivering it in their classrooms this spring. So we are going to be doing some follow-up as they do the implementation in their classrooms. So that's certainly information I can bring back and gather. Thank you for the question.
Are there any other questions? Okay, Trustee Burgess.
The other thing was there anything at the PD about the cultural sensitivity? I heard you refer to it. I know that the modules are, suggested, etc. That's an important piece in our board. I'm wondering how we put that into our professional development and how we monitor whether, our educators are taking that on board.
Yes. Through the chair to Trustee Burgess, it's an excellent question. It's an excellent consideration. All of the material is all being created for us. So we are using a provincial, if you will, from School Mental Health Ontario. It has been, all their material has been created with an equity lens. It is cultural, it is identity affirming. It is based on culturally responsive pedagogy. So they are infusing that into the material. And that is part and parcel of how our consultants and our special assignment teacher are bringing the learning to our educators to in fact then deliver these modules and deliver them in such a way that that they honor that that, if you will, are what is really what the will of our board. Yes.
Thank you. Are there any questions last time? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to thank you, Superintendent Bell, very much for your presentation. I believe this is your first presentation before the Education Committee, so welcome, and looking forward to hearing more presentations in the future.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your patience with the tech at the beginning.
I don't know if that screen is able to go up or not with our logo. Could we put that logo up? Well, thank you. Okay, delegations. I don't believe there were any delegations in advance. No one on the speakers list. New business. No new business. Oh, okay, there's the new logo. It's pretty cool, but I didn't do it. I think Superintendent Howitt took thoughts from our brains and then spoke to Mr. Houle, and I think he also then put it all together to come up with this fantastic design. So please, on our behalf, thank him as well for his work on this. Okay. Moving on to reports to be received. You have the report in your package on the Science of Reading plan and update. Does anyone have any questions regarding that report? I'm not, well, it's a report, so I'm not sure if she wanted to speak to it or not. There's no questions based, oh, sorry, I see your hand now, Trustee Sipkar, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. So I was just taking a look at everything, and it also was something that we had discussed over dinner, actually, was around reading. And I noticed on page 8, in terms of what the board is doing for the 2023-2024 response, it does have a little bit on French immersion and French reading, and it says it's there's a couple of also discussion or bullet points around the University of Florida Literacy Institute foundations. So I kind of have a two-part question. One is, how is the science of reading being applied to the French immersion programming in our schools? And then the second one is, what's the relationship with the University of Florida Literacy Institute? I'm just curious about that. So those are my two questions.
Superintendent Roberts, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. So with respect to the U-Fly, it is being used with the English language as well as the French. So it is obviously taught in English. There is a resource currently that we are looking into through the central office that will align with the French with hopes of that being used moving forward. That has not been released yet. It's still under review and consideration. But for now, we are using the U-Fly. With lots of it's been very well received, and lots of money has been spent on that resource with lots of demands from the schools, more resources to help support with the science of reading. And can you repeat part 2 of your question?
It was just, what was the relationship to the U-Fly, or is the University of Florida Literacy Institute?
So my understanding coming into this new is that it's just the actual resource and how it aligns nicely to the science of reading, which is a research-based strategy for our reading.
If I'm understanding correctly, it's just where the resource is from. I thought maybe there was like a partnership or anything like that, but it just is from. Okay, thank you.
Just the title.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions on the report? Student Trustee Pine?
Through the chair, I was just looking at the Acadians data, and I was wondering, have we run this program before? And if we did, like, are findings above or below where that was prior?
Through you, Madam Chair. So right now, this is a pilot. It was started in 2022-23. I believe it was a little later throughout the year that the central office team had approximately 10 schools where the team went out to administer the screener. We've done that same pilot again this year. Some of the schools remain the same, so we could collect that data as a continuum. And we've added some new schools to that list of 10 sites that were selected to capture and plan forward for when the screener is administered through all the schools. So kind of looking at the data to better prepare where those gaps are and how we can help support our educators and students moving forward.
Thank you. Any further questions? Trustee Burgess?
Thanks, Madam Chair. If I could ask through you, thanks for this. This is a lot. And my questions are, we've been given sort of, I guess, a heads up drum roll that, you know, this year's, we don't have the GSNs yet. We don't have, you know, what our budget is going to be. But I know that we value all these programs. And although there are a lot of acronyms in here, I know that we're always in danger of losing one or two or whatever. Do you see any kind of threats to any of this programming going forward? Because I know what we try to do is to deliver the best we can and make inroads, especially, you know, the right to read when we have to. So what are going to be our biggest challenges as far as a constrained budget that we keep hearing is coming?
Superintendent Roberts?
Through you, Madam Chair. So this came to us in 2021 through the Ontario Human Rights Report. So I can't predict what's to come. I know that we have put a tremendous amount of investment towards this, certainly under Dr. Howitt, prior to me being overseeing this portfolio. I would hope that the Ministry of Education would see the importance and the value and the tremendous gains that our students have had, whether it's through the science of reading and the additional resources to help our students, whether it's through Lexia and Empower, how we are supporting our teachers through those previous investments, and that the learning would continue. I'm not sure if Director Houston wants to add anything else to that.
Sure, I'll just add through you, Madam Chair, that I would think, and Superintendent Roberts alluded to it, that it did come from the Human Rights Commission, and there were several recommendations that education partners need to fulfill, that it may be challenging for the government to not provide money dedicated towards early reading interventions.
Do you mind if I just add to that? And I think we need to recognize that they made the announcement about the kindergarten curriculum. So I have some hope there that this learning and the amount of investment that has went into our teachers and educators will continue around reading and supporting our students.
Okay, thank you. Last call for questions. Seeing none, I shall move on to trustee question period. Just before we go there, thank you very much for the work and the report. We appreciate it greatly. So trustee question period, are there any questions for Education Committee? Trustee Burgess.
I didn't know where to put this in what committee, but and I don't need an answer certainly, but I would like an answer in a meeting going forward. I've had several requests from parents groups for something on the playground. It's a thing I'm not familiar with it, but it's Gaga balls, and it's a really great game, I guess. I know a coterminous board has them, and parents want to fundraise and have them at our sites, and they've been told they're not allowed. And I wondered if it was an OSB issue. I don't know what it is, but my question would be, why would we give direction to why would our board give direction that they're not allowed on our property? And it was specifically, it was couched in terms of the report coming from the Pediatric Society of Canada on children's play released recently, et cetera. And yet we're, saying, no, we can't have those on our property. So I'm just going to leave it there. It's not rhetorical. I do want an answer, but I'll leave it there and maybe somebody can report back. Oh, can you? Okay, yeah, GAGA. Balls. Playground. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I believe Superintendent Armstrong is taking note, and we'll get back. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, are there any notices of motion for Education Committee? Seeing none, are there any announcements for Education Committee? Superintendent Howitt, do you have an announcement to share with us?
Just wanted to announce about an upcoming conference or symposium that we are hosting for our students that identify as Black. Our Black Student Alliance or Advisory Committee, we asked them the question in December how, their input as to how to celebrate Black History Month, and they asked, we want something just for us. And we connected with our Dismantling Anti-Black Racism Committee in terms of determining a date. February is a very busy month for Black history. Wanted to give ourselves some lead time. So March 21st is the date. Mark your calendars. We're really excited to be hosting a day for students focused on pathways and celebrating Black joy and excellence, the arts, and including a student voice panel. So just wanted to share that and be looking forward to sharing the results of that day. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much for that. Sorry. No other announcements? Okay then, as our agenda is concluded, I will adjourn this meeting and we will reconvene in just moments with Operations and Finance Committee.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I am calling this meeting to order at 7:36. It's the meeting of the Operations and Finance Committee. Attendance is the same as the prior committee. So regrets from Trustee Leclerc and then Trustee Cook, Cheen, and Hatfield on the phone. Can I get a mover for approval of the agenda, please? Trustee Buckler, Trustee Armstrong. Any discussion? Okay, all those in support? And that carries. Declaration of conflict of interest. Okay, seeing none. Approval of minutes. Can I get a mover for the minutes from October 3rd, Ops and Finance Committee meeting? Trustee Armstrong, Trustee Buckler. Any discussion on those minutes? Okay, seeing none. All those in support? And that carries. Okay, business arising from the minutes. Is there any business arising? Okay, seeing none. So we will go to item G, presentations. And our first item G1 is environmental stewardship. And I believe we have Rachel Bondi, who is our energy and environmental officer here at the board. And I believe this is her first presentation at this committee anyways, I believe, or is it? Have you? Yes. Okay. So welcome, and hopefully the mic is on and you're all good to go there. But take. Perfect. Okay. Can everybody hear me? Perfect. And just really quick, white or black remote? White. Okay. Perfect. So, hi everyone. As mentioned, this is my first presentation at our board meeting. I was here at the end of last school year and was able to speak to a little bit of the work that we're doing around climate action. This time I'm back to provide kind of a mid-year update on some of the work we've been doing in our schools, specifically related to waste management, as that's one of the largest areas for improvement in our individual schools. Okay, so to start it off, I like to have a little bit of a conversation in the room. And on the screens right now, I have a map of Ontario. And on this map, we have several blue dots. And my question to the room, as a bit of an awareness piece, is to ask, what do we think all of these blue dots are? And they're not on routes. I'll clarify that. And they're not Tim Hortons. Any ideas? Can I take a guess? Yeah, absolutely. Landfills? Yeah. Yes. I'm looking and I don't know how much was included in your packets, but that is exactly it. So these are, and it directly relates to the waste minimization efforts in our school. So All of these dots represent the 805 active landfills that we currently have in the province of Ontario. So every few years, an organization called the Ontario Waste Management Association releases a report called the State of Waste. And within that, they detail what's going on related to garbage and recycling in our province. So as of 2019, as a province, we were throwing away almost 12 million tons of garbage every year. So to give a very Canadian example, if you picture a full-grown male moose, they weigh roughly 1 ton. So if you looked at the horizon and pictured 12 million moose walking towards you, that's what we're throwing out as a province every single year. To look at this from a statistic perspective, of that 12 million pounds, almost 30% travels across the border to be thrown out each day. And by our current landfill capacity in the province, by 2034, we will be out of space. If that 30% was no longer transferred across the border each day, we would be out of space by 2032, okay? And then of these 805 landfills in the province of Ontario, 7 absorb 60% of the waste that we throw out each day. So we have 15 that are deemed major. 7 of those 805 absorb 60% of what we throw out every single day. So why does this matter for us? A few years ago, Bill 197, was released in the province of Ontario, and this really changed the way we look at our waste as a province. So what was brought up in this bill was that now, in order for a new landfill to go in any municipality within the province, if it falls in an area called a buffer zone, so within 3.5 kilometers of an adjoining municipality, you need both of those municipalities to agree that they want this landfill in their backyard before it can proceed. And this agreement has to take place before any of the financials have been figured out, before any of the environmental impact assessments can be done, before we know anything really logistically about these landfills. But the one caveat is that it does not apply to current landfills that are open. So of those 805 in the province, they're not bound by Bill 197. So if we want to expand, we have that option. And that's what's being done since 2016. Since 2016, not one landfill has made it past the proposal stage in the province of Ontario. So since 2016, there have been several moves to expand our landfill capacity, and 40 million additional tons have been agreed to, over half of which is coming to our area of southwestern Ontario. So the biggest footprint is at Ridge Landfill, which is located just outside of Blenheim, Ontario. The other almost 5.5 million tons is coming to our regional landfill here in Windsor, Essex. So pretty substantial that not only will we be absorbing our waste going forward, we're going to be acting as an overflow for the rest of the province. Okay, so again, a little bit of a guessing game, and I'm not sure what's in your pamphlet there, but if we had to take a guess at where most garbage is coming from a continental perspective, who do we think is number one? The USA. So a lot of people tend to think of USA as the number one country. If we're looking from a continental perspective, it is North America. For the number 2 spot, it's all of our European countries, and South America typically fight for number 2 year after year, report after report. It bounces back and forth. 3rd overall is our Asian countries. 4th is into our Oceania kind of portion of the globe. And then 5th is into Africa. Now, the important one with this is that we all tend to look to our neighbors to the south, but per person, we are actually the worst producers of waste on the planet. So every Canadian, based on our total waste tonnage, throws out 6 pounds per person per day of garbage. And then I always like to include this one because I just think it's a really interesting stat. So this is called our Country Overshoot Day. This stat is put together from 2 different metrics. So information that comes from the United Nations, and then the other piece comes from the World Wildlife Fund. Now, we are based in education, and this is not based off an educational calendar. So this is strictly year begins in January, year ends in December. And by March 13th every year, we as Canadians have overshot our biocapacity as a country. Okay, so all of that just to frame out some of the work that we've been doing as a school board to mitigate our impact as part of our climate action plan that was released in June of last year. So for those who don't know, every year we complete 10 waste audits as a school board. We use these 10 to act as kind of a proportional representation for how we're doing board-wide. So we gather all of this information, we average it out, and that's where the stats that I present in the coming slides will really come from. For a little bit of background, what we do is an external company comes down every year, and in the 24 hours leading into these waste audits in our building, all of the garbage and all of the recycling is bagged and tagged based on not only the functional area it came from, but the bin that we grab it from. So for example, office garbage, office blue bin, office red bin. Okay, and from there we get some really, I call them pretty charts that kind of show what we're doing. So while this is the results from this year's waste audit, I think more important is to look at the comparison year over year. So on screen, I have our results from the 2022 and our results from the 2023 into 2024 school year. And if this is just an apples to apples comparison, if every year we threw out 100 pounds of stuff, year over year, we've increased our diversion rate from 27% to 42%, which is very, very, in my mind, incredible. One of the biggest things we were hearing from our teachers and our students is just a general lack of knowledge that they wanted to see improvement, but they didn't know where to start. And there's a lot of confusion coming out of the pandemic about where things are supposed to go and what proper recycling looks like. So in partnership with our environmental stewardship teachers, coming to meetings like this, being able to get in front of our principals, working with our student trustees and attending their meetings, we've had a lot of information get out into the system, and we're seeing a lot more diversion into our red bin and blue bin. Okay. However, with bad, there is good. With good, there is bad. And to form out what this looks like as a school board, based on our total staff and student footprint, every single person within our school community is throwing out 100 pounds of stuff while they spend time in our schools each year. So I throw out 100 pounds of stuff. Superintendent Armstrong throws out 100 pounds of stuff to single you out. Okay, so this is a straight picture of what our garbage looks like. So regardless of what bin it was supposed to end up in, this is where it came. So when we look at garbage, first and foremost, I think, thank goodness we have organics collection coming to our area in 2025, because a huge portion of that puzzle is organics and fibrous content, so our paper towels and uneaten food. From there, there's a pretty significant portion that is supposed to get to the red box. I consider this a very low-hanging fruit, so the red box is quite an easy thing to accomplish. The blue box proves to be a little bit more challenging because of the composition of what goes in there. Okay, from a blue box perspective, and we're going to get a little bit more into this, but we have a lot of headway to make, as 40% of what we throw out right now into that bin is incorrect. Okay, but it's a much better picture on the red bin side, as we have much fewer contamination points in that bin. So as we kind of get towards the end of this, two other big factors that I really look at when I'm looking at our overall waste picture are our waste diversion rates and our capture rates. So the diversion rate is a really simple metric by Ontario Regulation 10294, which is our waste reduction work plans. We're supposed to be aiming for a 60% diversion target as an institutional community. So what that means is through our traditional recycling streams, as that's all we have available to us right now, 60% of what we throw away is supposed to be diverted into the red or blue bin. So right now, when we do not look at contamination, we're hitting 43% diversion, which is actually pretty strong with what we have available to us. However, when we look at that contamination rate of what's ending up in the incorrect bin, it drops to 32. So we do have some progress to make there. Capture rate it's a little bit more challenging to understand because this one is more focused on behavior. So what we look at is the total material that should have been diverted that we actually diverted. So what was in the red and blue bin that was supposed to be there, taking away the contamination factor. And we divide that by what actually made its way to the red and blue bin and was supposed to be there, plus the component that ended up in the garbage and was supposed to go to those red or blue bins. And from a knowledge perspective, this looks like the messaging we're putting out there is starting to sink in, because we're doing fairly strong at 71% of the materials that are supposed to be recycled are actually ending up recycled. Okay, so for our board to kind of, if we take away nothing from today's presentation, these are the 3 areas we're really trying to hit home with our schools right now. Paper towels, juice boxes, and food waste are our 3 biggest problems as a school board. So paper towels specifically are what's known as end-of-life paper. Paper is recyclable 9 to 10 times over, but by the time something becomes paper towels, the fibers that are in that product are too thin, too stretched out, and too fragile to be turned into another piece of paper again. The other piece that we have to consider with paper towels is what they're used for. So predominantly cleaning up spills, whether it's food, whether it's water, and they're potentially being sprayed with some sort of chemical. So at that point, the contamination within the product itself makes it have to go to the garbage. Our second piece is juice boxes versus juice pouches. So juice boxes, here we struggle, and a lot of these end up in the red bin rather than the blue bin. And the reason being, it's confusing. When you look at the exterior of a juice box, it has a papery type texture to it, but we're more focused on the inside of that container rather than the exterior. So juice boxes have to make their way to the blue bin, not to be confused with juice pouches, which are not recyclable at all. That ends up being a source of contamination because of the shiny exterior. In talking to a lot of our students, especially our elementary students, they get confused because they associate that shininess with a metal tin, and they know that's supposed to go in the blue bin. So boxes, blue bin, pouches, garbage. And then the last one kind of speaks to our system as a whole right now, and I struggle with this one because socioeconomically our region is changing. And it's been changing for a long time. And this is a picture from our waste audits this year, and this is what we're finding in our garbage in almost every school. It's perfectly good, uneaten, unopened food. So here the messaging, we're working with individual principals and the students in our school of, if you have food left over at the end of the day, either bring it home, and that can be our after school snack, or we can bring it the next day. Or if we have a nutritional program in the school and it's things like apples, bananas, where there's not a strong allergy component or a risk in our buildings, we can contribute that right to the school snack program to kind of help with that in our own buildings and keep the food within our food chain. And then this last image that I bring up is something we're really trying to highlight for the students in our system and our staff members. So that's when we walk up to our source separation stations. It might not seem like a big deal to get one individual thing. My action to put a piece of paper in the wrong bin may not seem like such a big deal, but where it matters is when it gets downstream. So these photos are at our local solid waste authority. And it's really how recycling operates in the province of Ontario, and it's all around the commodification of waste. So when this makes its way downstream to our solid waste authority, and they divide out based on product and weight and type, if there's too many of the wrong things in these bundles, rather than 1 or 2 things ending up in the garbage at the actual source separation station, if these bundles are too contaminated, then that entire bundle ends up going to landfill. And that's the challenge that we're facing, and these are the types of images and things that we're trying to work on with our staff and our student body. So that's all I have for today. Did anybody have any questions before I hand it over to our next presenter? Thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to Trustee Nelson.
Thank you very much through you, Madam Chair. Those are pretty alarming stats, and that is concerning. So I'm wondering, you mentioned the students as well as the teachers being involved in some programming and some education. Are we doing anything with our parents as well and getting them involved in this knowledge-based learning?
Yeah, so that's one of the big things we've been working on now that we have our most updated stats is really getting the messaging out there. Actually, later this month, we're meeting with GECDSB just to include them. And one of the great things coming out of the most recent principals meeting with some of the stats I was able to present is quite a few of the principals actually reached out and asked, we have a parent council meeting next week or the week after. Can you come? Can you chat? Can you share this information? What we're trying to do in the spirit of collaboration, we are a school board and everybody brings different things to the table. What we're really trying to do is work with our 2 environmental stewardship teachers at all of these touch points. I do not have an educational background, and I think it's important that parents not only understand the numbers and what I'm dealing with, but also how are we trying to share these learnings with our students, and that's the background that our 2 stewardship teachers really bring to the table. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Trustee Buckler.
Sorry, I got caught up in the conversation through you, Madam Chair. The litterless lunches, is that not teaching our parents how to, and what's usable and what can be diverted? Do we still practice that? I remember it back when I was in school councils.
Yeah, so if it's okay, litterless lunches are definitely a big component of it. One thing we're trying to be careful in that situation of is just, again, socioeconomically, things are changing, and even within schools, you can end up with a very diverse community. So litterless lunches are great, but some of the messaging we're working on is around, well, it's great that I have glass lock containers. You know, not everything needs to be a state-of-the-art custom thing. So if you have an old margarine container, that can be something to bring school reuse, you know. It's great that I have this Yeti water bottle, but something we've been batting around with our schools is something like a crazy cup day, where it doesn't have to be a Yeti water bottle or a Stanley cup. It can be whatever wacky drinking cup you have for the day, just to ensure that no student or staff member feels left out in that process. But yes, litterless lunches are a big component of what we've been working towards. Go ahead, Trustee Burgess.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I do have some questions, and I hope I can put them together. This has, I think, over 40, 50 years. I mean, I remember attending, I'm this old, to the first Earth Day in 1970. You know, we were concerned about similar things, and there seems to be waves. You say paper towels are at end of life, but we don't want high velocity, high decibel, you know, wind machines in our washrooms either. So do we have any solutions that we have within our system? We've done single use. I was going to ask about how has the impact of having a, you know, a single-use plastic policy and regulation and that kind of practice, how has that made a difference in the last while? Because we kind of introduced that, I'm going to say before the pandemic, just before the pandemic, and then of course everything went, oh gosh, you know, go back to single use because you don't want to share anything, you know. Same thing with, you know, that was a thing for plastic, but we used to have composting and vermicomposting and like active at so many different schools. I don't know of any of that have it. Maybe Suzuki still does, I don't know. But that kind of thing, have we made any inroads to make gains where we used to have made gains? And food waste, particularly in single-use plastic.
Yeah, so a couple of things there. So I would say the debate of hand dryers versus our paper towels. The path that we're trying to move towards as a school board right now is when we're going to implement something in our system or make changes, rather than shooting the puck really quick, we're trying to take that step back and go, is there a way to examine these products from a full life cycle perspective? So what is the impact of using paper towels in our building versus what is the footprint associated with a hand dryer, you know, and going through in the same way, a disposable cup versus a plastic cup versus a metal cup versus a ceramic cup. Each one of those has a footprint associated with it. And I think as we progress through our climate action plan, and at the end of this year, we'll be releasing a second edition that has a more tangible greenhouse gas footprint associated with our daily activities, we'll have a better idea of what our North Star looks like going forward. And it's going to start to shape the lens we view a lot of these daily questions with, because what is the best option? The other thing I would say is we are by no means the experts. There's a lot of organizations that have been working on this for a long time, and it's going to come down to really utilizing those benchmarking opportunities. From a school perspective, though, a school board Canada-wide, this is something that is new. There is a professor out of Lakehead University that I've been chatting with, and her PhD candidate. And from a climate action perspective, we're the 5th board in Canada to release a true climate action plan. So Toronto District School Board was the first. There's been 2 additional in the province of British Columbia. one more in Ontario, and then we squeaked in as number 5. So this is very new, it's very innovative, and from a school board perspective, we're having to kind of reach very broadly outside of traditional school board perspective to come up with some of these solutions. But to kind of touch on some of your other questions, the pandemic was hard, and I think that's not lost on the people in this room. I think there was a lot of really great inroads that were being made. There was a lot of collaboration going on, and COVID kind of flew in the face of all of that and said, no, 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 stay to your circle, stay siloed. We're concerned about everything. So what's nice is getting in front of our student senate, getting into our schools and working with our stewardship teachers to, do classroom takeovers and assemblies, meeting with our parent councils, being able to come to the board meeting, and hopefully we have quite a few parents, guardians, community stakeholders that are listening in online. It gets this message out there. I'm a big believer in collaboration, so I always like to share my contact information at the end, and whoever from a stakeholder perspective would like to continue this conversation, I'm always all ears and ready for whatever challenge or solution is coming our way.
Certainly, through you, Madam Chair. If I just can add to that, as a board, we have certainly tried to make it less easier to use single-use plastic. So, for example, if you go through our Webstock program, which is where schools and individuals would be placing orders, you cannot purchase plastic straws, plastic cutlery, plastic baggies for ice. We've put environmentally friendly products, in lieu of that. But it does come back down to education, because at the same time somebody has a purchasing card and they can go to, the dollar store, they can go to a grocery store and still purchase those types of products. So the education piece, we continue to try and reinforce. And certainly we do see a lot of changes in individual departments where I know in this building, you don't find plastic cutlery. You better not, or I'll be pretty upset. We see that in facility services. It's, you invest in paper products and things of that nature. So the education piece is really the biggest component there that we're working against or working on.
I don't want to belabor it, but so I serve on the Windsor-Essex Regional Food Policy Council as well. And we've had, certainly lots of things on waste and, waste generation of energy from, and, all of it. But politically, you're saying, you're looking for collaboration. And I think when we have colleagues, and if we had our municipal partners online, for example, for collection of organic wastes on a large scale, I'm saying, it makes sense on a large scale. But politically, we're not there. We're still kind of NIMBY-ish in the county, kind of, and the city kind of has to because of the numbers, just because of their population and, you're required. But can you give us any perspective of that? Is there any other leaders in any other, I'm going to say, public sector or, larger institution? We have 70 branch offices kind of thing. Surely there's another organization that does a good job on this too.
So I would say, as it relates to kind of the food waste category, it's broad, and there's a lot of work being done. When we look regionally, I think there's a lot to be ironed out still as we approach that 2025 deadline with organics collection coming. We continually are working with the City of Windsor, the Solid Waste Authority, hopefully our county partners as we progress into that. I know that was a big thorn in my side as we looked at this, because the idea originally was to have a regional approach. And as it ties into our school board perspective around waste collection, I mean, candidly, it would have made things a lot easier rather than things potentially having to become a financial decision in addition to, that goodwill, what should we be doing as a school board? But I would say just candidly in the public, well, not so much public sector, but locally, one of the areas we're looking to benchmark off of, when you look at the work that the University of Windsor is doing, they've been in the news a lot lately. They've set some pretty lofty carbon neutrality targets, and I think there's a lot to be learned there. Now, they have a different funding structure than we do, but when we kind of shift away from waste minimization and look at some of the capital investment that's going into their buildings around their greenhouse gas footprint, they are definitely somebody that we're looking to collaborate with, even just from an idea sharing perspective. Although it might be tough from a funding perspective, but they've been doing a ton of really great work. So, sure, go ahead, Student Trustee Pine.
Yeah, luckily myself and Sarm were able to have you guys come and talk to our student senate about it, and so some of that wasn't as startling to us, but even just the newer numbers, looking at it, it's starting to get very scary, and a lot of it is the education factor. I mean, we were looking at, for example, the Tim's coffee cup at our senate, and it was completely, I think, 50-50 divided on whether it was red bin or blue bin, and I think a lot of it comes down to that if it has the plastic liner on the inside, it makes you second guess that juice box, that coffee cup. So I think getting to that point, and I think we're there. I think we gave you a lot of good ideas, and hopefully you can come back to our Senate later on this year. But a lot of it is just kind of getting kids back to knowing where things go. Thank you.
I would say, just to add final comment on that, number one, thank you very much for including me in the Student Senate. We walked away, myself, Donna, Craig, Ryan walked away with what felt like a billion ideas of where to go. And the one thing I really like about Student Senate is there's always just a level of candidness that doesn't exist sometimes, where when you get the students in a room, they will tell you what's going on in their schools. And so we learned the good, the bad, the ugly, which was fantastic. We are coming back, actually. We were speaking with Michelle about a week ago. So we've been slated. Keep the presentation kind of quiet because it's going to be something quite similar we're coming back with. But again, more ideas around waste minimization and where we can go from there. To touch on your one comment about where things go, one plug I would like to put forward for the Solid Waste Authority is something called Recycle Coach. It's a free app that we have access to, and it's really easy when it's downloaded. You open it up, there's a quiz every day where it kind of asks you, oh, there's this unique item, what bin is it supposed to go into? And it allows them to get some of their metrics behind the scene about how we're doing as kind of a local conglomerate of municipalities. The other thing is when you type in Tim's coffee cup, it will tell you immediately what bin it's supposed to go in. Another one that's not used here is called Waste Wizard. And that's one that they've been using up in the GTA. But locally, we've been focused in on Recycle Coach. And I know Heather Taylor with the Solid Waste Authority would appreciate if I could give her that little plug, because knowledge is knowledge, right? So, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay. I actually was going to ask a quick one on the organic waste. Julia or Trustee Burgess kind of covered it. So just the other supplemental that I had was, do we have a plan in place now that the county has said that they're not on board, or is that something you can't speak to entirely yet? I was curious about where we were going with that. So can't speak to it fully yet because I think there's just so much to be figured out behind the scenes. I know what I would like to see in my personal vision as kind of the earth geek of the board. But again, as things kind of evolve, we'll have more to share. I'm hoping as we progress towards the end of the year, I think the plan is I'll be back one, if not two more times. So hopefully by June, as we work towards our demand management plan that's due July 1st, we'll have a little bit more of a concrete idea of what this is going to look like for the region going forward. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, okay. Shelley was just saying it's a tough act to follow. It was a great presentation. Thank you. So we're on to item G2, broader public sector procurement directive, Building Ontario Business Initiative. So we had a good discussion about this at the policy committee level, so we thought we would bring it here to everyone so that everyone can share in the fun. So Superintendent Armstrong, I will turn this over to you to take it away.
Thank you. And if you'll forgive me, I'm going to do it sitting from here. And after that presentation, seriously, this does not remotely sound nearly as exciting. Okay, so I wanted to give everyone an update in terms of what our broader public sector, or I'll refer to as BPS directive, what that is. And then I wanted to explain to you what the Building Ontario Business Initiatives is as well, and I'm going to call that BOBBY. So we got a few acronyms going here. And BOBBY, which came into place on January the 1st, now is going to have an impact on BPS. So I wanted to explain how our procurement process is going to change from this new initiative from the government, and explain specifically how it really affects our procurement from the board's perspective. So broader public sector directive, let me explain what that is for you. So the BPS, this refers to any organization that receives funding from the Government of Ontario. So as a public school board, as Greater Essex County District School Board, we are a BPS organization. And similarly, like it's noted on the slide, hospitals, universities, colleges as well would fall into that sector. And the purpose of the BPS's directive is to ensure that publicly funded goods and services are acquired through an open, fair, and transparent process, and that they are managed consistently amongst all the BPS organizations. And this would include, it's all procurement, so it would include construction, consulting services, information technology, anything that an organization would acquire. The BPS is founded on 5 key principles. The first one being accountability, where organizations must be accountable for the results of their procurement decisions and the appropriateness of the process. Transparency, organizations must be transparent to all vendors. Where it's possible, vendors have to have equal access to information on procurement opportunities, processes, and results. Value for money, that makes reference to the fact that organizations must maximize the value they receive from the use of public funds. And as you can appreciate, we need to be very transparent in terms of how we use public dollars. So the value for money approach aims to deliver goods and services at the optimum total life cycle cost. Quality service delivery, that makes reference to the fact that frontline services that are provided by BPS organizations, so for example, our frontline service would be teaching. We must make sure that the service receives the right product at the right time and at the right place. And then there's product standardization. So this is intended to remove inefficiencies and make sure that there's a level playing field across procurement and through all the BPS organizations. The directive itself is long. It has 25 mandatory requirements. I've just listed 4 of them on this slide for you. One of them is that organizations must adopt the BPS Supply Chain Code of Ethics. It has to be visible to members of the organization as well as our vendors that are involved in supply chain activities. We're also required to have segregation of duties. 3 of the 5 functions that are involved in procurement roles have to be either with different departments or with different individuals. And those 5 procurement roles are through the requisitioning, budgeting, commitment, receipt, and payment processes, and those are segregated here at our board. We are also required to have an approval authority schedule. Sometimes you'll see the acronym AAS. That's actually in our procurement directive for the board, our policy. And that has to be established for the procurement of goods and for non-consulting services. It has to be approved by the Board of Trustees, and you do approve it. And consulting services are also required to have their own approval authority schedule. And then the last of the 25 that I want to specifically mention is that there must be a competitive open procurement process. And it must be in accordance with the thresholds that are actually stated in the BPS directive. To the extent that there can be exceptions, that would be if there was a trade agreement that was in place where the province has signed a trade agreement with another country or another group of countries. It's the only exceptions that we can have. All of this is in our regulation and policy BA01 procurement, and it's also reflected in our administrative procedure BA12, which is our purchasing procurement procedures handbook. So that's BPS, that's what we follow, that's what's in our policies, but now we have BOBBY, which is Building Ontario Businesses Initiative. So I'd like to explain what this is so that you just have a general sense of it. So this is a province-wide program that leverages the role of public sector procurement to benefit Ontario businesses and allow them greater access to procurement opportunities. So what this means is that there must be preference given to Ontario businesses in public sector procurement processes. We need to be supporting Ontario businesses to innovate and potentially create jobs in local communities. And it's also intended to strengthen the Ontario supply chain resiliency. And this has come into effect for school boards, effective January 1st, 2024. So then the question is, well, what's an Ontario business? So there is an Ontario regulation you'll see noted on the slide. An Ontario business is a supplier, a manufacturer, or a distributor of any business structure, so it could be a partnership, a corporation, a sole proprietorship, that conducts its activities on a permanent basis in Ontario. The business either has to have its headquarters or its main office in Ontario, or they have to have at least 250 full-time employees in Ontario at the time of the applicable procurement process. And the public entity, which would be, for example, the school board, we can rely on a written representation from the organization that they do meet the requirements that are noted above. So that's very high level what Bobby is. So what does that actually mean in terms of our procurement? And what does that change in terms of the BPS directive? So I appreciate this a little bit tiny to see. This is the AAS that I was referring to, which is the Approval Authority Schedule. And you'll see something similar to this in our policy and regulation BA01, where before where we used to have invitational competitive procurements for goods from $0 to $100,000. Bobby now has changed the rules, and through the BPS has changed the rules, so now that limit now changes to $121,200. Can't explain the math, the rounding, how that number comes to be, but that's the limit. So now our procurement policy and regulation now needs to reflect those limits because that is the requirement of the BPS. So that's the first change, is the change in the approval authority schedule. This is just a small example. I appreciate it's hard to see, but if you remember, I said there were 25 mandatory requirements in the BPS. Those mandatory requirements now have been amended to reflect $121,200 as being the higher end where you do need to have competitive procurement. And there's a requirement too that we have an electronic tendering system that is accessible to all vendors, and that is all vendors. So they want to make sure that nobody local, small is being excluded if it's an Ontario business. And so that's just a few of the changes that are reflected in the BPS directive. So in terms of how that influences procurement decisions, the basic steps of the procurement process itself actually remain unchanged when we incorporate Bobby. So we still have to do procurement planning. Market research is still required. We need to know where can we possibly get the goods or the services from. The only lens on it now is we actually now have to determine if there's an Ontario business that will provide that. We still need to identify the supply source, and we still need to decide on how we're going to approach the procurement and what our strategy is. So those elements are still effectively the same. What's really different now is the actual application when you're preparing a tender and when you're evaluating a supplier. That whole process part now has changed. So for example, when we are tendering, we need to determine if there's a trade agreement that's in place between Ontario and another country. And if there is, there are thresholds that are inside of those trade agreements that we have to adhere to. So that is one of the first things that we need to look at. And these thresholds that you see on this slide are now reflected in the new BPS directive, which is consistent with the trade agreements. For anything that we're procuring that's above a domestic or an international threshold, What we need to do is, if there are exceptions or provisions in that trade agreement that would allow us to give Ontario businesses preference, we need to apply those exemptions or those non-application items. We have to find the way to work with an Ontario business first where we can within those trade agreements. The next thing that we have to do is we are required to have a mandatory requirement that the vendor is from a jurisdiction in which Ontario has a trade obligation. Then the last item we have to put into place is we must apply a weighted domestic criteria so that we can increase the opportunities that could be afforded to an Ontario business. Some of the examples when you talk about a domestic criteria or a weighted domestic criteria are social and ethical responsibilities, such as environmental, labor, safety, and equity standards. Some of which kind of flows nicely when we talk about climate change and as we're thinking about social procurement in our work in equity, diversity, and inclusion. If the procurement is below a threshold in a trade agreement, if it's a domestic trade agreement, we are required to procure from an Ontario business by only inviting Ontario businesses. Or we have to give 10 additional points in the evaluation if a vendor is from Ontario. But if I had to say I had to do someone from Alberta, the Ontario business would get the 10 additional points. If it's an international trade agreement, then we need to procure from a Canadian or an Ontario business. So it's becoming quite restrictive, as you can see. This is an example from the province of what a procurement weighted procurement would look like in terms of criteria if you had a, say, a tender, for example. So on the left-hand side, again, it's not necessarily representative of how we do it, but on the left-hand side, you'll see currently, in this example, for example, an organization's experience is worth 25%. If they're AODA compliant, they'll get 5%. Knowledge of the service or the product, 15%. Pricing, as an example, 30%. And all those criteria get weighted when a procurement decision is being made. On the right is what is being proposed by the province. And you'll notice in the box below, those are the weighted domestic criteria now that we are required to consider. For example, environmental and sustainability is awarded 10%. Business responsiveness, which would inherently imply that somebody is close by, they can respond quickly, 5%. Local benefit, that means you are local, you are Ontario, 10%. 10%. You notice that the pricing in this example is in this example 20%. So we're seeing a shift where it doesn't matter if it costs more money. If it is an Ontario business, you do labor and give them the opportunity and the opportunity. So that obviously will eventually down the road have potential better implications to the board. Because I don't think necessarily our funding will increase with that. So again, it's just an example, but you can see where this is heading. So how does that impact us specifically as a board? So on this slide, I think what I'm trying to demonstrate is that the implications should be limited. I'm grateful for that. You'll notice that the majority of the board's expenses are salaries and benefits, so clearly would not be part of the BPS directive or Bobby. Amortization expense. It's a non-cash item. That's simply writing down the value of an asset over its useful life. So you need to take that out of the equation as well. Really, I think where we're going to see the impact of the BPS, the changes in BPS and Bobby, is with the board's supplies and services expenses, which is about 8% of our total expenses, which is about $42 million. And our fees and contract services, which make up 5% of our expenses, and that's about $23 million. And if you just, on this slide I've tried to, again, I'll send this to you so you have it. It's very tiny, but I also want to highlight again, I don't think it's going to be a huge impact to us. In supplies and services, 39% of our expenses are utilities, snow removal, grass cutting. Those are not things where we are worried that we can't procure, that we do that already as a course of business from an Ontario vendor. So that kind of gives us a little bit of comfort from that perspective. With respect to fees and contract services, 74% of those services are from student transportation, which we already know are from local vendors or Ontario businesses, and legal fees, again, which is from, again, an Ontario business. So that helps, I guess, address some of those concerns. I think if you were a school board in the Ottawa area and you were leveraging vendors from Quebec, you'd be a little bit more concerned in those boards than we are here with respect to that. In terms of our capital additions, construction is still subject to the provisions of the BPS directive and Bobby. We do have obviously a significant value of construction activity that is going on. But again, we use general contractors from Ontario. So again, we're not concerned that this directive is going to create problems or challenges for us from that perspective. However, what we do need to do is revise the policy and regulation for BA01, which is coming forward to this committee for recommendation to bringing forward to the public board session, because those approval authorities have to change, and we wanted to reflect some language with respect to Bobby in the policy and regulation. We do need to adjust our tender documents because we have to look at a domestic weighted criteria when we are evaluating tenders with respect to goods and services. And of course, part of that, as I've just mentioned, is the actual evaluation criteria itself. In terms of questions and clarifications, there are always tons of these things that come up because a lot of times these things get announced, but it comes into the details, and that's not always reflective when these changes come through. And so I'm sure there will be refinements. But for example, we did seek clarification with respect to equipment. And if it's manufactured outside of Ontario, but it's sold by a supplier with a business location in Ontario, we've confirmed that it qualifies under Bobby. You can see how nitty-gritty this has the potential of becoming. We've also confirmed that Bobby, the rules for Bobby applies to all purchases. There's absolutely no minimum dollar threshold on this. We have to give preference every single time to an Ontario business. So then that still leaves us with open questions that we are still seeking clarification from. One is Amazon. They may have warehouses in Ontario, but goods are coming from China, India, United States. And so we're still waiting to get some kind of clarification on what you procure from Amazon. We don't know yet how we would control purchasing card purchases. Again, there's no dollar threshold here. And so we're still trying to sort out what that looks like, and other boards are too. So we'll collaborate with other boards across the province. And then there are also agreements that we have, for example, for international students. We have groups that help us recruit. But again, some of them are not located in Ontario. So what does that mean? So there are still some questions that we have, and there probably will be more as this goes along. But you know, the legislation and these directives never contemplate everything initially up front. So those are some things we still need to contemplate and consider. And with that, that is the end of this exciting presentation. But I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Superintendent Armstrong. And as she noted, this presentation relates to the recommendation underneath, but we'll take questions here first if there are any from trustees. Okay, I'm not seeing any. I had two questions. One was, I know that you touched on in your slides all of the places that this could impact. I'm wondering if you've at all, even back of envelope, kind of estimated additional costs at this point, itemizing, you know, what vendors we would have to eliminate, or if we just got this and basically it's been, you know, just digesting it all right now.
Thank you. In terms of the impact, we have looked at the number of vendors that we procure from and if there's any that are outside of Ontario. So we have done that work. It's not significant. We're still evaluating, though, that information. Nothing's been suggested that we would have to exit out any contracts that we currently have in place, because certainly there would be legal ramifications for doing so. But neither has the province said you need to renegotiate anything. So we're working off the assumption that we let those contracts continue until their natural expiration date. But we are seeking clarification with respect to that.
Okay, thank you. And then so following it with that, you mentioned the one slide around construction and all contractors being from Ontario. My question was actually around more building materials, and if that falls under, or if because the contractor or the builder is purchasing those, does it matter? Or if you know that.
I'm going to tell you my answer is that because the contractor is Ontario, we're not buying the building supplies direct. It is the general contract that's doing it. Our contract is with the contractor. And as long as that is a business that's an Ontario business, then I'm not concerned where where they are procuring those materials.
Okay, any other questions on this presentation? Sure, go ahead.
I'll ask it now because otherwise when the motion goes on the floor, I'll ask it then. So we pre-qualify folks, by asking them questions that we need to know when we're giving a tender or something, or procure something. Is the government at the same time encouraging Ontario businesses to join a roster of kind of pre-qualified, oh yes, I'm an Ontario supplier of XYZ? Is there a thing, or are we all scrambling individually to make up our own lists and, kind of duplicating that work? Is there a simultaneous kind of pre-approved Ontario list of?
Through you, Madam Chair. There's a lot of collaborative networks that we work through when we look to procure goods. And as we first search, we look to the Ontario Education Collaborative Network as an example. So a lot of businesses that do specific work with various school boards throughout Ontario would look to try and become partners with that organization, become pre-qualified through those networks. And that would allow them the ability to provide quotes to school boards interested in that work. So there's various sorts of collaborative networks such as that one. That's not the only one. I'm trying to think of another one we've used recently. Supply Ontario? Yep, Supply Ontario. Thank you. There's another one I was thinking of too. If it comes to me, I'll let you know. But we try, one of the focuses lately from the ministry has been collaborative purchasing with other boards, and we're having to report those collaborative purchases. So we're mindful of that and mindful of the networks that exist that allow us the option to collaborate.
Yeah, sorry. You probably will see in the report today on procurement that there is actually one competitive procurement where we did collaborate with Windsor-Essex Catholic District School Board as an example to try and leverage buying power.
Well, if I could, that just makes sense. And it's been going on for a long time and stuff, but this really, my concern is the time on task as well. It's harder to meet all those criteria. The other thing I have a question on, and I'll just ask it because I know it's going to go on the floor, our page 17. You mentioned that we give additional points, but you said particularly give 10 additional points. Is that up to 10? Is that like a scale of 10? Because I noticed that in our revision here, we didn't name 10. Or are we just leaving it open knowing that the government might change the thing and we're not naming the scale, we're just saying additional?
I would say we have some discretion with respect to that, but I think we definitely do need to show that there is a preference for an Ontario business in the tendering process.
Okay, Any further questions? I'll continue along the agenda. This is coming up in a couple items anyhow. There were no delegations and there was nobody on the speakers list. So we are now at new business. J1 is the policy and regulation procurement. So you have that in your packages. And we've just had a very thorough and excellent presentation on it. Thank you. Can I get a mover? Sure. Trustee Burgess, can I get a seconder? Trustee Buckler. Any further questions or discussion at this point? No? Okay. Seeing none. All those in support for J1? Okay, and that carries. Thank you for all your work on this, and I know our procurement officer couldn't be here tonight, but thank them as well, and Mr. Mayhew and Ms. Malash. Looking forward to maybe what you bring back to policy, depending if we if we need to see it again, but thank you. Okay, so with that, I'm going to move to item K, reports, and there's a number of reports on here. I will just go through one by one and look for hands to see if there's any questions on them. K1, any questions? Final financial expense report for last year, for the year ending August 31st, 2023. Okay. Go ahead, Trustee Burgess.
I'm just wondering, I think our snow removal budget's probably in good shape, but they're quick. Knock on, I know, it's still,
This is for
just
last
early
year.
February.
This,
Right,
yeah, okay.
I know, but I'm just saying our budget is what we're spending and, whatever. I'm just wondering, as far as occasional and absent teachers, et cetera, absent of any kind of employee group, where we are. I know it's in here, but since even this report.
Through Madam Chair, without looking at the exact number right now, I can tell you that we are on pace with the prior year. And we have provided an increase in the budget, knowing that we had a big increase last year, so I can say that. So it is still unusually high. It is high, it continues to be high. It's as high, if not as higher than last year. So we continue. We continue to track that on a monthly basis. I believe the report we are showing you is for the first quarter ended. Tends to not be the highest quarter because schools start. So we'll start to see those absences increase as you get the next report, and we'll keep an eye on that and report back.
So just for clarification, that would have been item K3, the interim financial expense report. Okay. That's okay. I just need to keep us honest here, So we'll just jump to K2. Sure, go ahead, Trustee Armstrong.
Actually, page 38, which is K1.
Oh,
I just
okay.
wondered, there's a grant for keeping students in school of $56,800. How do we keep kids in school? What's that money for? How is it used? Am I understanding it correctly, this table?
I will turn that over to, Superintendent Bell. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. So keeping students in school, is a PPF, or think of it as a grant that comes through, and it is typically for particular schools that have been identified by the ministry. So not all school boards, it's not all schools at a particular board. So that is envelope money for that particular initiative.
Thank you. And Superintendent Armstrong just wanted to note that on page 49, there's an explanation of all the PPF grants. So there's a little bit more detail in there as well. Okay. Okay, any more on K1? Go to K2. Okay, seeing none. K3, which is the interim financial expense report, as Trustee Burgess already started on. Anything else on that one? I just have one question, actually. Seeing none. I just wanted to make sure I understood everything correctly. I believe it's on page 67. If I'm understanding this correctly, our projected deficit for the year, we're on track for $4.455 million. Is that correct? am I misunderstanding that number there? Or is that, I think it's, was it page 65? Oh, 65. I'm sorry, I had 67. So it's page 65.
So through you, Madam Chair, I'll start, and then Mr. Mayhew can chime in. We came back to the board in December and asked to go up to 2% of the board's operating allocation, which took us to $8.9 million. We are on track for the $8.9 million deficit.
Thank you. That's what I was wondering clarity on, if it was showing how much of our deficit we've used for the year, or if it was saying that's where we're projected to be at the end of it. So it looks like we will use that full 2%. Okay. Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry. I'll continue along then. K4, any questions on that report? Okay, seeing none. Any questions on K5, the Ontario School Board's insurance exchange premium renewal? I didn't want to look at Julia on that one. Continuing along then to questions on K6, which is the Windsor Essex Student Transportation Services Annual Report. So on busing, no. Sure, go ahead, Trustee Burgess.
Just because I've had so many different questions of clarification about how dismissing kids at 1 o'clock on April 8th and not having transportation, why that decision was made as a consortia, as an individual board, as logistics for individual travel during a day when we have like an hour to get everybody kind of home safe.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. There's some challenges because buses are stacked to start with. So to say we want buses to pick up our students at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, they typically they may have a run prior to or after, or we may be the last bus in a run of 3. And I think there would be some challenges too in securing bus drivers to do that as well, because sometimes they have other jobs that they're going to or things of that nature. So it was for those reasons that we couldn't offer the transportation.
Okay, anything else on K6? Okay, seeing none, we will go to K7, and I believe that Superintendent Armstrong had a couple notes that she wanted to make.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. This report gives you the timelines for our 24-25 budget cycle, which we're actually engaged in right now as a senior team and as administration. A couple things I just wanted to highlight. That the board did file an in-year deficit elimination plan with the Minister of Education for 2023-24's budget for the $8.9 million deficit. We have not yet heard back from the Minister on the approval of that plan, so I'm hopeful we'll hear something soon because the alternative is not pleasant. This year is going to be a very important year for consultation. And so I want to be transparent and be very public in saying that to our students, our staff, and our school community. We have to address the board's cost structures. We have to. We need to adjust those structures, cost structures, so that they are in line with ministry funding. There's no additional magical pot of money at the end of the rainbow that is coming here. And I know we've done a great job as a board advocating, but we can't assume that anything is going to be coming. So we can't continue on. We're going to be using 1/3 of our accumulated surplus by the end of the year is gone. That took years to save. So there's going to be some very, very difficult decisions that are going to have to be contemplated as we prepare and as we bring forward the 24-25 budget to trustees for approval. So really the opportunity for public input is extremely important. We welcome it. And the report that I've highlighted to you does show the groups that we are going to be consulting with specifically in terms of community groups that we work with here as a board. And it also explains the public consultation processes that are going on. And I know that Trustee Sipcar will mention this specifically in the announcement section. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Armstrong, and thank you to your team for bringing this forward and painting the picture of the importance this year of the public being involved and sharing their thoughts and comments on our budget. Any questions from trustees? Okay. Seeing none, I will move us along then to trustee question period. Any questions from trustees? Sure, go ahead, Trustee Burgess.
I was asked to pose a question, and I don't see the line item, etc. I don't know how much postal mail we send out. I believe we do metered mail almost exclusively at this building. I'm not sure if that's true of every school as well. But I wondered if we ever do things like, well, when a postage stamp comes out honoring Mary Ann Shadd, for example, a wonderful, Windsorite, why we can't get a huge load of Mary Ann Shadd postage stamps and make sure that Greater Essex, embraces the art of that, the Black excellence of that, something we have to do anyway. So the question was, would there be a detrimental effect to the cost of actually getting postage stamps in bulk versus metered postage in our system?
Through you, Madam Chair.
I don't need an answer completely either. It's not rhetorical, though.
I can see all the mail that goes out of this building through office services is through meter. We prepay on the meter. It prints a stamp. There isn't a physical stamp used. I wouldn't know the volume of mail that happens at the school level. A lot of the school mail, it would be courier items, possibly internally. If they are sending mail, it's not a lot. It's miscellaneous. They're probably purchasing just the small packets at a Shoppers or something like that. So we can look into that, but I wouldn't know off the top of my head. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from trustees? Okay, seeing none, I'll move to notices of motion. Any notices of motion for the Operations and Finance Committee meeting? Okay, seeing none. Announcements. Any announcements from trustees? Okay, seeing none, I have several, so I'll just start on those. First of all, happening tomorrow, there's a Skill Trades Expo at the WFCU Center. We have some awesome posters around, so please take a look out for that. Then, as Superintendent Armstrong mentioned, we are starting our budget consultation process. The survey goes out Monday, February 12th, and it runs until March 1st. There is a presentation actually on YouTube, so there's a link to that on the survey, and I assume that we'll be posting that from our social media channels as well. So please, even I'm thinking GECPIC, different avenues like that, encouraging the usage of the survey. And then there's 2 opportunities to give in-person feedback and for public consultation, and that's at our March 19th meeting and also at our April 4th meeting here at the school board. Obviously, those meetings are at 7 p.m. So it would be really great if we could hear from our community on this. So whoever is listening on YouTube, feel free to share as well. And then I have another notice of just for the trustees, but this also relates to public consultation. Our education development charges bylaw comes for review on April 4th. And if anyone is interested in those, there is a stakeholder meeting, though. This is for stakeholders such as municipalities on March 21st, but the public can, oh, sorry, did I say February? March 21st? Oh, sorry, February 21st. But then that EDC bylaw is coming to the board on April 4th. Second to last, we have, because we don't have an Operations and Finance Committee meeting in March, I thought I'd take the opportunity to announce Earth Hour, which is March 23rd at 8:30 p.m. And then this is, I heard this today, and it was mostly because Rachel Bondi was here. Apparently there's going to be a new eco-schools happening at the board office, which is very exciting. So I don't know who's leading that up. I assume that it's Superintendent Armstrong over here.
I did not tell Director Houston yet. But we were hoping to join as an eco school here at the board office. We can do that, so.
So this was a surprise to everyone. Only Shelley knew. And me, I encouraged it. Okay, so that's it for the announcements here. And sorry, principal, yes, she's the leader on it. So, or I'm volunteering her now. So, okay, so if there's no other announcements, any other announcements? None? Okay, I will adjourn this committee meeting and we will convene into the public board meeting, and I will hand that over to Trustee Nelson. So give us 1 minute to rearrange over here.
Finance Committee as well as our Education Committee. As we move back into our public session, we have regrets from Student Trustee Mohammed as well as Trustee Leclerc. Trustees Hatfield, Trustees Cook, and Trustee Cheen are online with us through the telephone. Moving on to item E, are there any declarations of conflict of interest? No declarations of conflict of interest. Actions of the board meeting from the private session.
Yes, we have a few actions. We have item C, which is a personnel issue. I need a mover. Trustee Sipcar, Trustee McKinley, a seconder, all in support. And then we have G1 and G2, if you don't mind, I'm going to put them together. And I need a mover and a seconder for G1, G2. Trustee Burgess, Trustee Sipcar, all in support. Oh, G1, G2, sorry, property issues. All in support, okay, we'll both pass.
Thank you. Now moving on to G, approval of the minutes. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the approval of the minutes of October 3rd, 2023? Trustee McKinley, Trustee Armstrong, thank you. Seconded by Trustee Armstrong. All in support? Any opposed? Thank you. Any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none. Moving on to recommendations from the Standing Committee. Trustee McKinley, is there any business coming from the Education Committee? Nothing. Thank you very much. Moving on to Operations and Finance. Trustee Sipcar, is there any business coming?
Yes, item J1. I don't know that I need to read it out, but we just dealt with it. Can I get a mover? Sure, Trustee Burgess, seconded by Trustee McKinley. All those in support? And that carries.
Thank you. Moving on to item J, notices of motion. Are there any? Trustee Sipcar?
Sure, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I have a notice of motion for our next board meeting that the Greater Essex County District School Board raise the Pan-African flag at all school board facilities during the month of February, beginning in 2024-2025, to honor Black history in our community.
Thank you, Trustee Sipcar. And now moving on to item K, adjournment. If there's no further business, there is no further business. Then we call this meeting adjourned at 9:53, it looks like. Oh, sorry, 8:53. My apologies. I know. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.